The blizzard hit Laredo, Texas with a ferocity that no one had seen in 50 years, transforming the dusty frontier town into a frozen wasteland in the span of hours. And Delilah Norwood knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die out here in the white emptiness if she did not find shelter soon. Her fingers had gone numb inside her thin gloves an hour ago, and her mare stumbled beneath her, exhausted from fighting through drifts that reached past her knees. Delilah could barely see 3 feet ahead through the wall of white that surrounded them, the wind screaming like a living thing as it tore at her cloak and stung her face with ice crystals sharp as glass. She had left town that morning to deliver medicine to the Henderson Ranch, 15 miles north, never imagining that the gray clouds on the horizon would unleash this kind of fury. The year was 1873, and she had lived in Texas her entire 22 years, surviving scorching summers and drought and even the occasional tornado. But this winter storm was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her horse whinnied in distress, and Delilah leaned forward, trying to offer what comfort she could. "I know, girl, I know. Just a little further." But she had no idea which direction would lead them to safety. The world had become nothing but white and cold in the terrible howling of the wind. Then, through the storm, she saw it. A dark shape, barely visible but unmistakably solid. A building of some kind. Hope surged through her chest, giving her the strength to urge her mare forward. They struggled toward the shape, and as they drew closer, Delilah could make out the rough timber walls of a cabin, smoke rising from a stone chimney. Someone was inside. She half fell from her horse when they reached the small structure, her legs barely able to hold her weight. She stumbled to the door and pounded on it with what little strength remained in her frozen hands. "Please, please, someone help!" The door swung open almost immediately, and warmth rushed out to meet her. A man stood silhouetted against the firelight inside, tall and broad-shouldered, and before she could say anything more, strong hands caught her as her knees buckled. "I have got you," a deep voice said, steady and calm despite the chaos of the storm. "You are safe now." Delilah found herself being lifted easily, carried across the threshold into blessed warmth. She heard the door slam shut behind them, cutting off the worst of the wind's scream, and then she was being settled into a chair near a blazing fire. The man moved with quick efficiency, disappearing back outside for a moment, and she realized he was seeing to her horse. When he returned, shaking snow from his coat and hat, she finally got a good look at him. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His eyes were a striking gray-green, like the sage that grew in the high country, and they studied her with concern as he knelt in front of her chair. "Can you speak? Are you hurt anywhere?" His hands worked at the frozen knots of her cloak, his touch gentle despite the urgency in his movements. "I am all right," Delilah managed, though her voice came out hoarse and shaking. "Just cold, so cold. Your horse is in the lean-to with mine. She will be fine. But you need to get out of these wet clothes before hypothermia sets in." He pulled her cloak free and tossed it aside, then started on the buttons of her coat with steady fingers. There was nothing improper in his manner, just the calm competence of someone who knew what needed to be done. Delilah's mind felt sluggish, her thoughts moving slowly through the fog of cold and exhaustion, but she managed to focus on his face. "Who are you?" "Gabriel Reeves. This is my hunting cabin. What in God's name were you doing out in this storm?" "I was delivering medicine." "I did not know it would get this bad." Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely get the words out. Gabriel stood and moved to a trunk in the corner, pulling out thick wool blankets and what looked like one of his own flannel shirts. "Here, there is a screen in the corner." Get behind it and strip out of everything wet, then wrap yourself in these blankets. I will turn around, but you need to do it now, before frostbite sets in." Delilah nodded and forced herself to stand, her legs shaking beneath her. She made it behind the wooden screen he had indicated and began the painful process of removing her wet clothing. Her fingers barely cooperated, and she had to bite back a cry when feelings started returning to them in sharp, painful prickles. "What is your name?" Gabriel called from the other side of the screen. "Delilah Norwood." She managed to peel off her dress and the layers beneath, gasping at how cold her skin felt even in the warmth of the cabin. "I run the general store in Laredo with my father. I know the place. Good man, your father." "How far out were you when the storm hit?" "I am not sure. Maybe 5 or 6 miles from the Henderson Ranch." She wrapped herself in the blankets he had provided, then pulled on the flannel shirt, which hung nearly to her knees. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else, something distinctly masculine. "I got turned around in the white. I could not see anything. You can come out now." Delilah emerged from behind the screen, clutching the blankets around herself. Gabriel had turned back to face her, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw her, though it was gone too quickly for her to identify. He gestured to the chair by the fire. "Sit. I will make you something hot to drink." She sank back into the chair gratefully, holding her hands toward the flames. The cabin was small but well built, with a single room that served as bedroom, kitchen, and living space. A narrow bed stood against one wall, covered in furs and quilts. Shelves held supplies and tools, and animal pelts hung from the rafters, curing. It was a bachelor's space, but it was clean and organized, and most importantly, it was warm. Gabriel worked at the small stove, heating water and mixing something in a tin cup. When he brought it to her, the smell of whiskey and honey and spices rose with the steam. "Drink slowly," he instructed, pressing the cup into her hands. "It will warm you from the inside." Delilah obeyed, sipping the hot toddy carefully. The alcohol burned going down, but it did spread warmth through her chest, and she felt some of the terrible cold beginning to recede. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did." Gabriel pulled another chair close to the fire and sat, his own cup in his hands. "This storm is unlike anything I have seen in these parts. It came down from the north like the hand of God himself. I was checking my traps when I saw the clouds coming and barely made it back here before it hit." "How long do you think it will last?" His expression was serious. "Hard to say. A storm this severe could be days, maybe longer." Delilah felt her stomach drop. "Days, but my father will be frantic. The whole town will think I am dead. There is nothing to be done about it right now. No one can travel in this, and anyone who tries will end up frozen solid within an hour." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "You are safe here. That is what matters. When the storm breaks, I will get you home." The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. She was trapped in a small cabin with a man she did not know, with no way to contact her father or anyone else. In normal circumstances, this would be a scandal that would ruin her reputation completely. But these were not normal circumstances, and survival took precedence over propriety. Gabriel seemed to read her thoughts. "I know this is not ideal, Miss Norwood, but I give you my word as a gentleman that you are safe with me until spring comes, if that is what it takes. Your virtue and your safety are both under my protection." Something in the sincerity of his voice made her believe him. She met his eyes and saw nothing but honest concern there. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I am grateful for your kindness. Gabriel, please. I think we can dispense with formalities given the circumstances." "Then you should call me Delilah." He nodded, a slight smile touching his lips for the first time. "Delilah it is." They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the storm rage outside. The wind howled like something alive and angry, battering against the cabin walls, but the structure held firm. Gabriel had built well. "How long have you had this cabin?" Delilah asked, needing to fill the silence with something. "Built it myself about 3 years ago. I run cattle on land about 10 miles south, but I come up here during the winter to trap and hunt. Good money in furs, and it gives my foreman a chance to manage things without me looking over his shoulder." He stood and moved to check the fire, adding another log from the stack beside the hearth. "I was planning to head back to the ranch in another week, but this storm has changed those plans. You live alone at your ranch most of the time. I have a small crew, 5 men who work the cattle and maintain the property. But yes, I am unmarried if that is what you are asking." He glanced at her, that small smile appearing again. "I am not some hermit, though. I go into Laredo regularly for supplies and social occasions." Delilah felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I did not mean to pry." "You are not prying. We are going to be spending quite a bit of time together in very close quarters. It is natural to be curious." He returned to his chair and leaned back, studying her with those sage-colored eyes. "What about you? I am surprised a young woman like yourself is not married yet." "I was engaged," Delilah heard herself say, surprising herself with the confession. "Last year, to a man named Thomas Caldwell. He owned the bank in town. He died. Fever took him in August. The pain of it had dulled over the months, but it still sat heavy in her chest. We were supposed to be married in September." Gabriel's expression softened with sympathy. "I am sorry. That must have been very difficult." "It was. But life goes on, as my father likes to say. The store keeps us busy, and there is always work to be done." She took another sip of her drink, feeling the warmth spread further through her body. "Grief is a strange thing. Some days I barely think of him. Other days it feels like it just happened. Time helps, but it never completely heals, I think. We just learn to carry it better." There was something in his voice that suggested personal experience, and Delilah wondered what losses Gabriel had endured. Before she could ask, he stood again. "You should eat something. I have got stew on the stove and some bread from a few days ago. It is not fancy, but it will fill your belly." Delilah realized she was ravenous. She had not eaten since breakfast, and that felt like a lifetime ago. "That sounds wonderful." Gabriel served them both generous portions of venison stew in wooden bowls, along with thick slices of slightly stale bread that he toasted over the fire. They ate in companionable silence, and Delilah found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. He was handsome in a rugged way, all hard planes and strong features. His hands were calloused and scarred from work, but they moved with a surprising grace. And there was something about the calm, steady way he handled everything that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since before Thomas died. After they finished eating, Gabriel collected their bowls and cleaned them efficiently. "You should rest," he said when he returned from the small washing area. "You have been through an ordeal and your body needs sleep to recover." Delilah glanced at the single bed, then back at Gabriel. "Where will you sleep?" "I will make a pallet by the fire. I have done it before." "You take the bed." "I cannot take your bed. This is your cabin, and you are my guest. A guest who nearly froze to death. You need proper rest." His tone left no room for argument. "Besides, I am used to sleeping rough. A night by the fire is nothing." Too tired to protest further, Delilah allowed him to help her to the bed. Her legs felt like they were made of lead, and exhaustion crashed over her in waves now that she was warm and fed. Gabriel pulled the furs and quilts up around her, tucking them in with a gentleness that made her throat tighten. "Sleep as long as you need," he said softly. "I will be right here if you need anything." Delilah wanted to thank him again, wanted to tell him how grateful she was, but sleep was already pulling her under. The last thing she was aware of was the sound of the storm outside and the comforting presence of Gabriel moving around the cabin, keeping watch over her safety. She woke disoriented in the darkness, unsure where she was or what had pulled her from sleep. Then memory returned in a rush, along with the howling of the wind outside. The cabin was dark except for the glow of the fire, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. Gabriel sat in the chair by the hearth, his head tilted back, apparently asleep. But as soon as she stirred, he was awake and alert, turning to face her. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough with sleep. "Yes, I am sorry. I did not mean to wake you." Delilah sat up, pulling the quilts around her shoulders. "What time is it?" "Near midnight, I would guess. You have been asleep for about 5 hours." He stood and stretched, and she heard his joints crack. "The storm has not let up at all. If anything, it has gotten worse." As if to emphasize his point, a particularly violent gust of wind slammed against the cabin, making the walls groan. Delilah flinched instinctively. "The cabin is solid," Gabriel assured her, moving to check the fire. "It would take more than wind to bring it down." He added wood to the flames, stirring them back to life. "Are you hungry? Thirsty? Some water would be good." He brought her a cup and she drank gratefully. Now that she was more rested, she could think more clearly about her situation. She was trapped here with a man she barely knew, potentially for days. Her father would be beside himself with worry. The entire town would be talking. But there was nothing she could do about any of it except wait for the storm to end. "You should try to go back to sleep," Gabriel said, returning to his chair. "We have a long wait ahead of us." But Delilah found she was not sleepy anymore. Her mind was too active, too full of questions and concerns. "Tell me about your ranch," she said instead. "What made you choose cattle over farming?" Gabriel settled back into his chair, seeming content to talk. "My father was a cattleman. I grew up on a ranch in eastern Texas, learning the trade from the time I could walk. When he died, he left me enough money to buy my own spread. I chose this area because the land was affordable and there was good grazing. It has been hard work building it up, but I have got a good herd now, about 200 head. That is impressive. You must be very dedicated. Cattle do not give you much choice. They need tending regardless of weather or how you are feeling. But I like the work. I like being my own boss, making my own decisions." He paused. "What about you? Did you always work in your father's store, since I was old enough to count change?" "My mother died when I was 12, and it has been just my father and me ever since. He taught me the business, and I have been helping run it for years now." She pulled the quilts tighter around herself. "I like it, mostly. I like talking to people, helping them find what they need. And I like keeping the books, making sure everything balances. That is a valuable skill. Not everyone has a head for numbers." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily despite the unusual circumstances. Delilah learned that Gabriel had 2 younger sisters who lived with their aunt in San Antonio, that he had fought briefly in the war between the states as a young man, that he had once considered becoming a doctor but could not afford the schooling. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Lerdo, about the challenges of running a business in a frontier town, about her dreams of one day traveling to see the ocean. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with her again, and she found herself struggling to keep her eyes open. Gabriel noticed immediately. "Sleep, Delilah. We will have plenty of time to talk tomorrow." This time when she lay down, she fell asleep almost instantly, lulled by the warmth and the strange comfort of knowing Gabriel was keeping watch. When she woke again, pale gray light was filtering through the small window, and the smell of coffee filled the cabin. She sat up to find Gabriel at the stove, cooking what looked like bacon and eggs. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "I hope you are feeling better." "Much better, thank you." Delilah climbed out of bed, still wrapped in his flannel shirt and blankets. "Is the storm still going? See for yourself." She moved to the window and looked out, then gasped. The world outside was completely white, with snow piled halfway up the cabin wall. The wind still blew fiercely, sending sheets of snow swirling through the air. She could not see more than a few feet in any direction. "We are buried," she whispered. "Not quite. I went out earlier to check on the horses and clear the door. The lean-to is holding up fine, and I brought in more firewood." He plated the food and brought it to the small table near the window. "But we are definitely not going anywhere today." They ate breakfast together, and Delilah found herself relaxing into the strange domesticity of it all. There was something surprisingly comfortable about sharing a meal with Gabriel, about the quiet companionship that seemed to exist between them, despite having known each other for less than 24 hours. After breakfast, Gabriel insisted on checking her hands and feet for signs of frostbite. He examined them carefully, his touch gentle and clinical, and pronounced her lucky. "No permanent damage that I can see. Your fingers and toes will be sore for a few days, but they should heal completely." He released her hand, and she felt the absence of his warmth immediately. "You were very fortunate. Another hour in that storm and you would have lost something to the cold." "I owe you my life," Delilah said quietly. "You do not owe me anything. Any decent person would have done the same." But there was color in his cheeks when he turned away, and she wondered if he felt the same strange connection that she did. The day passed slowly. The storm showed no signs of abating, and they were confined to the small cabin with nothing to do but talk and tend the fire. Gabriel produced a worn deck of cards and they played hand after hand of poker, betting with dried beans from his supplies. Delilah won more often than not, and Gabriel accused her of counting cards. "My father taught me," she admitted with a laugh. "He said every good merchant needs to understand probability. Your father is a wise man. Remind me never to play cards with him." As the afternoon wore on, Delilah found herself watching Gabriel more and more, the way he moved around the cabin with easy confidence, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the deep, warm sound of his laugh. He was different from Thomas, who had been refined and educated, always conscious of his position in society. Gabriel was rough around the edges, a man shaped by hard work and harsh conditions, but there was a kindness in him that ran deep. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Gabriel asked her about Thomas. "You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to," he said quickly. "But I find myself curious about the man who won your heart." Delilah considered for a moment, then decided that talking about it might help. Thomas was a good man, responsible, intelligent, well-respected. Everyone in town thought we were a perfect match. She stared into the flames. "But if I am being honest, I am not sure I was in love with him. Not the way I thought I should be." "What do you mean?" "I cared for him. I respected him. I thought we would have a good life together. But I never felt that spark that people talk about in novels. That sense of not being able to breathe when he walked into a room." She glanced at Gabriel, feeling suddenly vulnerable. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "No, it makes you honest." Gabriel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I think many marriages are built on less than passion. Respect and compatibility and shared goals, those are important things. But you are right that there should be more. There should be something that makes your heart race, that makes the whole world seem brighter. Have you ever felt that way about someone? Once." His expression grew distant. "Her name was Caroline. We met when I was 20, just starting to build the ranch. She was the daughter of a merchant in town, beautiful and smart and funny. I thought she felt the same way about me. What happened? Her father did not think a struggling rancher was good enough for his daughter. He wanted her to marry someone established, someone with money and connections. She chose to obey him. Gabriel's jaw tightened. She married a lawyer from Austin. Last I heard, she had 3 children and seemed content enough. I am sorry. It was a long time ago. But it taught me that sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes practical considerations win out. He looked at her then, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. But that does not mean we should stop hoping for more. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then Gabriel stood abruptly, breaking the spell. It is getting late. We should both try to get some rest. That night, Delilah lay in bed listening to the storm and thinking about Gabriel's words, about love and practicality and the choices people made. About the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this cabin and this man. She was not sure what any of it meant, but she knew that something was shifting inside her. Some door was opening that she had thought closed forever. The next morning brought a slight break in the storm. The wind had died down to a steady blow and the snow had stopped falling, though the sky remained heavy and gray. "It is not over," Gabriel said when Delilah expressed hope that they might be able to leave. "This is just a lull. There will be more coming. I can feel it in my bones." He was right. By noon, the snow was falling again, even heavier than before, and the wind had picked up to a shriek that rattled the shutters. They were well and truly trapped, but Delilah found that she did not mind as much as she thought she would. There was something almost peaceful about being cut off from the world, about this small bubble of warmth and safety in the midst of chaos. And there was Gabriel, whose presence filled the cabin with a quiet strength that made her feel protected in a way she had never experienced before. They spent the afternoon cooking together, Gabriel teaching her how to make his grandmother's recipe for cornbread. It required careful measuring and mixing, and they stood side by side at the small counter, their arms brushing occasionally in the confined space. Each touch sent a little jolt through Delilah, and she found herself acutely aware of his nearness, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way he smelled like wood smoke and winter air. "You are a quick learner," Gabriel said as she kneaded the dough with growing confidence. "This usually takes people several tries to get right. I told you I was good with measurements and following instructions." She glanced up at him and found him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What?" "Nothing. Just thinking that your father is very lucky to have you helping him run the store." But Delilah thought there might be more to it than that. She thought maybe Gabriel was thinking some of the same thoughts that had been occupying her mind more and more frequently. Thoughts about what it might be like to kiss him, to be held in his strong arms, to have the right to touch him whenever she wanted. The realization that she was developing feelings for Gabriel hit her like a physical blow. It had only been 3 days. How could she possibly be falling for someone she barely knew? But the heart did not follow logical timelines. She was learning. And there was something about the intensity of their situation, about being forced together in such close quarters with death raging outside, that seemed to accelerate everything. They had shared more honest conversation in these few days than she had shared with Thomas in months of courtship. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Gabriel suddenly stood and went to one of his shelves, returning with a small harmonica. "I am not very good," he warned, "but music helps pass the time." He played softly, simple melodies that Delilah half recognized as folk songs and hymns. The sound was sweet and melancholy, filling the cabin with something achingly beautiful. When he finished, she applauded softly. "That was lovely. Where did you learn to play?" "My mother taught me when I was a boy." She said music was good for the soul, that it could lift you up when nothing else would. He turned the harmonica over in his hands. She died when I was 15, childbirth. The baby did not make it either. I am so sorry, Gabriel. Like I said before, we learn to carry these losses. They become part of who we are. He looked at her. But sometimes I think the losses make us appreciate the good things more when they come along. They teach us not to take anything for granted. Is that what you do? Appreciate the good things? I try to. His gaze was steady on hers. Right now, for instance, I am appreciating the company. It would be a long, lonely wait without someone to talk to. I feel the same way. Delilah felt heat rising in her cheeks but forced herself to hold his gaze. I know this situation is not ideal, but I find myself glad that if I had to be trapped anywhere, it was here, with you. Something shifted in Gabriel's expression. He set the harmonica aside and leaned forward. Delilah, I need to tell you something, and I hope you will not think less of me for it. Her heart began to pound. What is it? These past few days, getting to know you, talking with you, I have felt something that I have not felt in a very long time. Maybe ever. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I know it is too soon. I know it is probably just the circumstances playing tricks on us, but I cannot stop thinking about you, about what it might be like if this was not temporary, if this was our life. Delilah could barely breathe. Gabriel, I am not asking you for anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. When we get back to Laredo, if you want to forget this ever happened, I will understand. But I could not let this time pass without being honest about what I am feeling. She stood, her legs shaky, and moved to where he sat. Without allowing herself to overthink it, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, warm and strong. What if I do not want to forget? She whispered. What if I am feeling the same things you are? Gabriel's eyes searched her face. Are you sure? I do not want you to say something just because we are trapped here together, because you feel grateful that I helped you. This has nothing to do with gratitude. Delilah squeezed his hand. I have spent the past year feeling numb, going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. But these past few days with you, I have felt more present, more myself than I have in months. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me feel safe but also excited, like anything is possible. Gabriel stood, still holding her hand until they were facing each other. He was tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Heat and tenderness and barely restrained longing. I am going to kiss you now, he said softly. If you do not want me to, tell me to stop. Delilah's answer was to rise up on her toes and close the distance between them. His lips were warm and soft against hers, the kiss gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. But when she pressed closer, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, he made a low sound in his throat and deepened the kiss, his arms sliding around her waist to pull her flush against him. It was like nothing Delilah had ever experienced. Thomas's kisses had been pleasant but restrained, always proper. This was something else entirely. This was fire and need and a hunger that made her whole body come alive. She could feel Gabriel's heart pounding under her palm, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. That was, he began, then seemed to lose the words. Yes, Delilah agreed, understanding completely. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the storm howl outside. Then Gabriel pulled back slightly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. We should probably talk about what this means, he said, though he sounded reluctant to break the spell. We probably should. But Delilah was not ready to think about practical matters yet. She just wanted to savor this feeling, this incredible sensation of being wanted and wanting in return. Still, Gabriel was right. They could not just ignore reality. "When we get back to Laredo," she said slowly, "people are going to talk. They are going to assume things happened here whether they did or not. I know. And I am sorry for that. Your reputation will suffer because of me. Not because of you, because of a storm that neither of us could control." Delilah took a deep breath. "But Gabriel, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens when we return, whatever people say, I do not regret this. I do not regret meeting you or talking with you or kissing you. Even if this is all we ever have, these few days in a cabin during a blizzard, I will treasure them." Gabriel's expression was fierce. "This is not all we are going to have. I do not care what people say or think. When we get back, I am going to court you properly. I am going to ask your father's permission to see you. And if you will have me, if your feelings remain the same once we are back in the real world, then I am going to marry you, Delilah Norwood." "You are assuming I will say yes," she teased, though her heart soared. "I am hoping you will say yes. Because I have already fallen for you, and I do not think there is any going back from that." Delilah kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Then I think you should probably know that I have fallen for you too." They spent the rest of the evening wrapped in each other's arms, talking about the future they might have together. Gabriel told her about his ranch, about his plans to expand the herd, about the house he wanted to build to replace the simple foreman's cabin he currently lived in. Delilah shared her thoughts about the store, about how she thought they could expand into other goods, maybe even start a small lending library for the town. "You have given this a lot of thought," Gabriel observed. "I love the store, but I have also felt limited by it. My father is traditional in his thinking. He does not always see the possibilities for growth." She traced idle patterns on Gabriel's arm where it rested around her shoulders. "But if I had a partner who supported my ideas, who was willing to take some risks, I think we could really build something. I like the way you think, and I like the idea of being your partner in all things." Gabriel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We could make a good team, you and I." "We could," Delilah agreed, warmth spreading through her chest. That night, they again slept separately, Gabriel insisting on propriety despite the kisses they had shared. "When I marry you," he said firmly, "I want to do it right. I want to be able to look your father in the eye and tell him honestly that I treated you with respect and honor." Delilah appreciated his integrity even as part of her wished they could throw caution to the wind. But he was right. If they wanted a future together, they needed to do this properly. The storm continued for 2 more days, the snow falling so heavily that at times the cabin was plunged into an eerie twilight even in the middle of the day. But inside, Delilah and Gabriel created their own world. They cooked together, played cards, told stories about their childhoods. Gabriel taught her how to clean and oil his rifle, and she taught him a complicated card game her father had learned from a riverboat gambler. They kissed often, unable to resist the pull between them, but always stopped before things went too far. On the 6th day after Delilah's arrival, she woke to silence. The howling wind that had been a constant presence for nearly a week had finally stopped. She sat up in bed, listening intently, and realized she could hear nothing but the crackle of the fire and Gabriel's steady breathing from his pallet on the floor. "Gabriel," she called softly. "The storm. I think it is over." He was awake instantly, rolling to his feet with the quick reflexes of a man used to being alert. He went to the window and pulled back the shutter, and morning sunlight poured in, so bright after days of gray gloom that they both had to squint against it. "The snow has stopped," he confirmed. And the sky is clearing. We might be able to leave tomorrow if the weather holds." Delilah should have felt relief, should have been eager to return home to see her father, to assure him she was safe. But instead, all she felt was a strange hollowness. Tomorrow they would leave this cabin and return to the real world, where they were not just Gabriel and Delilah, but a rancher and a shopkeeper's daughter, where social expectations and other people's opinions would intrude on what they had built here. Gabriel seemed to sense her thoughts. He came to sit on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. "It will be all right," he said gently. "We will figure it out together. What if everything is different when we get back? What if this was just something that happened because we were isolated and scared? Do you believe that?" "No," she admitted. "But what if you do? What if you wake up in a few days and realize you made a mistake?" Gabriel leaned in and kissed her softly. "I am not going to wake up and realize anything of the sort. What I feel for you is real, Delilah. It is not dependent on being in this cabin or on any particular circumstances. It is just real." They spent that day preparing for the journey back. Gabriel went out to check on the horses and assess the trail conditions. The snow had drifted to extraordinary depths in some places, and it would be slow going, but it was possible to travel. He dug out paths from the cabin to the lean-to, and stocked up on firewood for the next time he came up to the cabin. Delilah cleaned and organized inside, washing their dishes and making sure everything was put away properly. Her own clothes had dried by the fire over the past days, and she reluctantly changed back into them, feeling strange in her own dress after wearing Gabriel's shirt for so long. That evening, their last night in the cabin, they held each other close by the fire and talked long into the night. They made plans and promises, building a future together in words and hopes. "I will speak to your father as soon as we return," Gabriel said. "I know it is fast, but I do not want to waste time. I know what I want, and what I want is you." "He will say yes," Delilah said confidently. "He has been worried about me since Thomas died, wondering if I would ever be happy again. When he sees that you make me happy, he will give us his blessing." "I hope you are right." They left at dawn the next morning, the world transformed into a glittering wonderland of white. The sun was brilliant in a cloudless blue sky, and the snow sparkled like it had been dusted with diamonds. It was beautiful but treacherous, and Gabriel led them carefully, his horse breaking trail while Delilah's mare followed in the packed snow behind. The journey that should have taken 3 hours took most of the day. Several times they had to detour around drifts too deep for the horses to manage. But Gabriel knew the land well, and he guided them steadily southward, toward Lerdo and home. As they approached the town in the late afternoon, Delilah could see smoke rising from chimneys and hear the sounds of people calling to one another. The town had survived the storm, though she could see damaged buildings and collapsed roofs here and there. A shout went up as they rode down the main street, and suddenly, people were pouring out of buildings, staring at them in amazement. Delilah saw her father emerge from the store, his face going white and then red as he caught sight of her. "Delilah," he ran toward them, and she slid from her horse to meet him, finding herself swept up in a crushing embrace. "Oh my God, Delilah, we thought you were dead. We searched for days, but the storm was too severe. We thought we had lost you." "I am all right, Papa. I am safe." She pulled back to look at him, seeing the tears streaming down his weathered face. "This is Gabriel Reeves. He found me during the storm and gave me shelter in his cabin. He saved my life." Her father turned to Gabriel, who had dismounted and was standing quietly nearby. For a long moment, the two men just looked at each other. Then her father stuck out his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home safe." Gabriel shook his hand firmly. "She would have done the same for anyone. Your daughter is a remarkable woman, Mr. Norwood. That she is." Her father's gaze sharpened slightly, and Delilah wondered how much he could read in their faces in the way they stood close together. "You must both be exhausted. Come inside. We will get you fed and warmed up properly." The next few hours were a blur of activity. The whole town seemed to want to hear the story of Delilah's survival, and she told it over and over, leaving out the more personal details. People embraced her, thanked Gabriel, brought food and blankets and expressions of relief and joy. Through it all, Gabriel stayed close, his hand occasionally brushing hers when no one was looking, his eyes meeting hers across rooms full of people. And she knew that they were going to be all right. Whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. That evening, after the initial chaos had died down, Gabriel requested a private word with her father. Delilah waited anxiously in the living quarters above the store, pacing the floor and trying not to imagine what was being said in the office below. When her father finally called her down, both men were sitting in the chairs by the old stove, looking serious but not angry. Gabriel stood as she entered, and her father gestured for her to sit as well. "Gabriel has asked for permission to court you," her father said without preamble. "He has been honest with me about the time you spent together and about the feelings that have developed between you. He has also assured me that he treated you with complete respect and propriety." Delilah looked at Gabriel, whose expression was calm but whose eyes held a hint of nervousness. She turned back to her father. "And what did you say?" "I said that the decision is ultimately yours. You are a grown woman, Delilah, and you have shown excellent judgment in the past. If you want to be courted by Gabriel, then I will give my blessing." Her father's expression softened. "But I also want you to be sure. I know the circumstances were unusual, and sometimes feelings that develop in extremity do not last when life returns to normal. Papa, I know my own heart, and I know that what I feel for Gabriel is real and lasting." She reached over and took Gabriel's hand, not caring that her father could see. "I want this, I want him." Her father was quiet for a moment, studying their joined hands. Then he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Then I give you both my blessing. Gabriel, you are welcome in our home and in our family." Gabriel's hand tightened on Delilah's. "Thank you, sir. I promise you will not regret this. I will spend every day making sure your daughter is happy and cared for. See that you do." But her father's tone was warm. "Now, both of you get some rest. Tomorrow we can start dealing with the practicalities." Gabriel left soon after, heading to the boarding house where he kept a room for his visits to town. But before he went, he pulled Delilah aside in the shadowed doorway of the store. "Tomorrow I will come by to take you to lunch at the hotel. We will start our courtship properly where everyone can see." He cupped her face in his hands. "But I want you to know that this is not just for show. Everything I said in the cabin, everything I promised, I meant it all. I know you did, and I meant everything I said too." Delilah rose up to kiss him, not caring that people might see from the street. "I love you, Gabriel Reeves." She felt him smile against her lips. "I love you too, Delilah Norwood, and I am going to marry you just as soon as you will let me." True to his word, Gabriel began courting Delilah with all the proper formality that society expected. He called on her at the store, brought her flowers, took her to church socials and town dances. They went on chaperoned picnics and rides through the countryside. To anyone watching, they were simply a respectable couple going through the stages of courtship. But there were moments when they were alone, stolen minutes in the back room of the store or on a quiet trail, when the passion they had discovered in the cabin flared between them. Gabriel would kiss her until she was breathless, his hands trembling with the effort of maintaining restraint. And Delilah would press herself against him, wishing they were already married, already able to express their love fully. The town gossips had plenty to say, of course. Some people whispered that improper things must have happened in that cabin, that Delilah should be shamed rather than celebrated. But the majority of people seemed genuinely happy for them, choosing to believe in the romance of their story rather than looking for scandal. 6 weeks after the storm, Gabriel proposed properly, going down on one knee in her father's parlor with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. Delilah said yes through happy tears, and they set the wedding date for late April, when spring would be fully arrived, and the memory of that terrible winter would be softening into something beautiful. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Delilah worked with the town seamstress to create a wedding dress from white linen and lace. Gabriel spent every spare moment working on the house he was building on his ranch, determined to have it ready for his bride. Her father helped organize the reception, which would be held in the church hall with food donated by half the town. The night before the wedding, Delilah sat with her father in the quiet of the store, both of them lost in thought. "I am going to miss having you here," her father said softly. "The store will not be the same without you. I will still help out when I can. Gabriel's ranch is not that far, and we have talked about maybe opening a satellite store out that way eventually to serve the outlying ranches." She squeezed his hand. "You are not losing me, Papa. You are just gaining a son." "A good son," her father agreed. "I am proud of you, Delilah. You have been through so much, and you have come out the other side stronger and happier. Your mother would have been so proud, too." They sat together in companionable silence, and Delilah thought about the strange path that had brought her to this moment. A deadly storm, a remote cabin, a cowboy who had promised she was safe with him until spring came. And now spring had arrived, bringing with it new life and new love, and a future full of possibility. The wedding took place on a gloriously sunny April afternoon, the kind of day that made it hard to believe winter had ever existed. The church was packed with people, and flowers decorated every surface, their sweet scent filling the air. Delilah walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes locked on Gabriel, who stood at the altar looking devastatingly handsome in his Sunday best. When they reached the front, her father placed her hand in Gabriel's and stepped back. The minister began the familiar words of the ceremony, but Delilah barely heard them. She was too focused on Gabriel's face, on the love and joy she saw shining in his eyes. "I, Gabriel Reeves, take you, Delilah Norwood, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I, Delilah Norwood, take you, Gabriel Reeves, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." The minister smiled. "By the power vested in me by the state of Texas and before God and these witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Gabriel, you may kiss your bride." Gabriel pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. When they finally broke apart, both laughing, he whispered against her ear, "Finally, you are mine now." "I have been yours since that first night in the cabin," she whispered back. The reception was joyful and boisterous, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. People toasted the happy couple, sharing stories and good wishes. Gabriel danced with Delilah for the first dance, holding her close and moving with surprising grace for a man more used to working with cattle than waltzing. "Are you happy?" he asked as they swayed together. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." Delilah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Thank you for finding me in that storm. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for stumbling onto my doorstep. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe in love again." He kissed the top of her head. "I cannot wait to start our life together." As the sun began to set, they slipped away from the reception, climbing into the wagon Gabriel had decorated with ribbons and flowers. The crowd cheered as they drove away, heading toward the ranch and the house that would be their new home. The house was small but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a parlor with windows that looked out over the prairie. Gabriel had worked hard to make it welcoming, with furniture he had crafted himself and curtains his sisters had sent from San Antonio. There were flowers in jars on the table and a fire crackling in the hearth. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reeves," Gabriel said as he carried her over the threshold. Delilah laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I like the sound of that, Mrs. Reeves." He set her down gently, his hands settling on her waist. The playfulness faded from his expression, replaced by something deeper and more intense. "Delilah, I know we have waited a long time for this. If you need more time, if you are nervous, we can take things slowly." "I do not want to take things slowly." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I have been waiting for this moment since that first kiss in the cabin. I want to be your wife in every way. I want to start our life together tonight." Gabriel's eyes darkened. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and she felt the last restraints fall away. This was not stolen kisses in hidden corners or carefully chaperoned moments. This was the beginning of their life together, and they had all night to explore this new intimacy. Gabriel lifted her into his arms again and carried her to the bedroom, where the large bed was covered in quilts his mother had made and soft pillows that smelled like fresh air and sunshine. He set her down carefully, his hands shaking slightly as he began to undo the tiny buttons running down the back of her dress. "I am not very experienced at this," he admitted. "I want to make it good for you." "We will figure it out together," Delilah said, turning to face him once her dress began to fall loose. "That is what marriage is about, is it not? Learning together." They undressed each other slowly, nervous and excited and full of love. And when they finally came together, skin against skin, heart against heart, it was everything Delilah had dreamed it could be. Tender and passionate, awkward and perfect, a joining of bodies and souls that left them both breathless and transformed. Afterward, they lay tangled in the quilts, Gabriel's arm around her shoulders and Delilah's head on his chest. She traced lazy patterns on his skin, marveling at the reality of being here with him, of having the right to touch him this way. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you so much it almost frightens me." "I love you too," Gabriel kissed her forehead, "and you never have to be frightened. We are in this together for the rest of our lives. Whatever comes, we will face it side by side." They made love again in the early hours of morning as dawn light began to filter through the windows. And then they slept, wrapped in each other's arms, at peace in a way neither had been in years. The first months of their marriage were an adjustment as they learned to live together, to merge their habits and routines into something new. Delilah took to ranch life more easily than she had expected, learning to cook for the ranch hands, to tend the vegetable garden, to help with the endless tasks that came with running a cattle operation. Gabriel was endlessly patient, teaching her what she needed to know, and never making her feel inadequate when she struggled. In turn, Delilah helped Gabriel with the business side of the ranch, keeping detailed records of expenses and income, negotiating better prices with buyers, organizing the operation in ways that made everything run more smoothly. They were, as Gabriel had predicted, an excellent team. By midsummer, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Gabriel one evening after dinner, watching nervously for his reaction, but his face lit up with such joy that all her anxiety melted away. "A baby," he said, sounding awed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy." He pulled her into his arms, laughing. "I am more than happy. I am ecstatic. We are going to be a family, Delilah." "We already are a family," she pointed out, but she was smiling too, caught up in his enthusiasm. Gabriel knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you. We are going to love you so much." Delilah ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with emotion. This man, this good, kind, wonderful man, was her husband and the father of her child. How had she gotten so lucky? The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as Delilah's belly swelled with their child, Gabriel became even more protective and devoted. He would not let her lift anything heavy or work too hard. He rubbed her feet when they ached and held her when the baby kicked. And every night, he would talk to their unborn child, telling stories and singing soft songs. In February, as the anniversary of the storm that had brought them together approached, Delilah went into labor. Gabriel sent for the midwife and stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand and wiping her brow and telling her how strong she was, how brave. Their son was born just after midnight on a cold, clear night with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. He came into the world squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in Delilah's arms, and she stared down at the tiny face in wonder. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "Gabriel, look at him. He is perfect." Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Delilah and his other hand gently touching the baby's tiny fingers. "He looks like you. He has your nose. He has your chin, and your dark hair." They named him William, after Gabriel's father, with the middle name Thomas, honoring Delilah's first love in a way that felt right and healing. Little William was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he filled their home with noise and life and a joy neither of them had known was possible. As Delilah recovered from the birth, lying in bed with William nursing at her breast and Gabriel sitting beside them reading aloud from a book of poetry, she reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. She had gone from a woman hollowed out by grief, going through the motions of living, to someone overflowing with happiness and purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, setting the book aside. "About how strange life is, how one moment, one chance encounter can change everything." She adjusted William in her arms, smiling as he made little satisfied sounds. "If that storm had not happened, if I had not stumbled onto your cabin, where would we be now?" "Still alone," Gabriel said quietly. "Still looking for something without knowing what we needed to find." "Do you ever wonder if it was fate? If we were always meant to find each other?" "I like to think so. I like to think that out of all the cabins in all the wilderness in Texas, you found your way to mine for a reason." He leaned over to kiss her softly. "But whether it was fate or chance or divine providence, I am grateful every single day that you walked through my door." "So am I," Delilah whispered against his lips. "So am I." The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their combined management, growing from 200 head of cattle to over 500. They added more land, more hands, and built a larger house when their family expanded. William was joined by a sister, Emma, 2 years later, and then another son, Jacob, 2 years after that. The house was always full of noise and laughter and the controlled chaos of raising 3 energetic children. Delilah never stopped working, though her focus shifted from the store to the ranch, and to the satellite supply post. She and Gabriel opened to serve the outlying homesteads. She kept meticulous records, managed the finances, and became known throughout the area as a sharp businesswoman who drove a hard bargain but was always fair. Gabriel proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful with the children, always ready to teach them about the land and the animals and the values that mattered most. He taught William to ride before the boy could walk properly, taught Emma to read using the stars as a guide, taught Jacob the importance of being gentle with smaller creatures. On the 10th anniversary of the day they met, Gabriel surprised Delilah by taking her back to the cabin where it all began. They rode up on a warm June day, the land green and lush, the sky a brilliant blue unmarked by even a hint of clouds. Gabriel's foreman was watching the children for the weekend, giving them this rare time alone. The cabin looked much as it had that winter, though Gabriel had made some improvements over the years. He used it still during hunting season, and sometimes they would bring the whole family up for a summer retreat. "I cannot believe it has been 10 years, Delilah said as they stepped inside. The space felt smaller than she remembered, but it still held the same sense of safety and warmth. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." Gabriel pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Best 10 years of my life," he murmured into her hair. "Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard days. The days when the cattle got out or the kids were sick or we had to sit up all night during the drought, especially those days, because we faced them together, because I had you by my side." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes still as full of love as they had been that first night. "You remember what I told you, that first night when the storm was raging. You said I was safe with you until spring came. And I meant it. But spring came and you stayed anyway. You chose to stay to build a life with me. That is what I am most grateful for. Not that fate or chance or God brought you here, but that you chose to stay, that you keep choosing to stay every single day." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "There is nowhere else I would rather be, no one else I would rather be with. You are my home, Gabriel. You and the children and the life we have built. That will never change." They made love in the cabin that afternoon, slow and tender and full of the knowledge that comes from years of learning each other's bodies and hearts. And afterward, lying in each other's arms just as they had a decade before, they talked about their future. "William is asking about going to school in San Antonio," Gabriel said. "He wants to study law, I know. He has his heart set on it." Delilah traced patterns on Gabriel's chest. "Are you all right with that? With him not wanting to take over the ranch, of course. I want our children to follow their own paths, not feel obligated to do what I did. The ranch will be here if any of them want it someday, and if none of them do, we will figure something else out." He kissed the top of her head. "What about Emma? Any ideas what she might want to do? She talks about being a teacher. She loves books and learning, and she is so patient with the younger children." Delilah smiled. "She reminds me of your mother sometimes, the way you have described her." "That is a high compliment. My mother was a remarkable woman. So is our daughter." They spent the weekend at the cabin, hiking the trails they had been too storm-bound to explore that first time, swimming in the cold creek that ran nearby, cooking simple meals over the fire. It was a gift to have this time alone, to remember who they had been before they became parents and ranchers and pillars of the community. To just be Gabriel and Delilah again, two people who had found each other against all odds. When they returned to the ranch, they found everything running smoothly, and the children excited to tell them about all the adventures they had had with the foreman and his wife. William demonstrated a new trick he had taught his horse. Emma showed off a story she had written, and Jacob presented them with a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked himself. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythm. The seasons turned, the cattle were driven to market, the children grew taller and more independent. Gabriel's hair started to show threads of silver at the temples, and Delilah noticed fine lines appearing at the corners of her eyes. But they were happy lines, earned through years of smiling and laughter. When William left for San Antonio at 16 to attend school there, Delilah cried for a week. But Gabriel held her through it, reminding her that they had raised their son to be independent and brave, and that he would come home for holidays. And he did, full of stories about his classes and the city and the future he was building. Emma followed her own path, becoming a teacher in Lerdo and eventually marrying a young doctor who set up practice in town. Jacob surprised everyone by falling in love with ranching even more deeply than his father had, taking on more and more responsibility, until by his 20th year, he was essentially running the day-to-day operations while Gabriel focused on the business side. When Delilah's father died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, it was Gabriel who held her through her grief, who reminded her of all the good years they had had together, who helped her see that her father had lived a full and happy life. They buried him in the town cemetery next to Delilah's mother, and the whole community turned out to pay their respects to a man who had been a fixture in Lerdo for over 50 years. The years continued to pass. Grandchildren arrived, bringing new joy and energy. William married a lawyer's daughter in San Antonio and had 2 girls. Emma and her doctor husband had 4 children who kept them busy and laughing. Jacob married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and they had 3 boys who grew up in the saddle. Gabriel and Delilah settled into the comfortable rhythms of late middle age. They still ran the ranch, though more and more responsibility was shifting to Jacob. They traveled occasionally, visiting their children and grandchildren, even taking a trip to the ocean that Delilah had dreamed of as a young woman. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on, holding hands like teenagers. "Do you have any regrets?" Delilah asked one evening when she was 62 and Gabriel was 66. "Anything you wish you had done differently?" Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, considering. "No," he finally said. "Not a single one. Oh, I have made mistakes, plenty of them. But I do not regret any of it because it all led me here to this moment with you. That is all I have ever needed." "Me too," Delilah said softly. "I used to wonder sometimes what my life would have been like if Thomas had not died, if I had married him as planned. And I feel guilty for thinking it, but I am grateful it worked out the way it did. Because it gave me you. It gave me our children and this life. I cannot imagine anything better." "No guilt," Gabriel said firmly. "Thomas was a good man, and you would have had a good life with him." "But you have had a great life with me. There is a difference," she laughed. "No false modesty there. Why be modest about the truth?" But he was grinning. "We have had a great life together, Delilah, one for the storybooks. A love story that started in a blizzard. The winter storm that gave me everything I ever wanted." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their wedding night and the births of their children and every important moment in between. The prairie stretched out around them, vast and beautiful, the land they had shaped and that had shaped them in return. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Jacob and his wife and boys had come for dinner, and the noise of children playing and adults talking floated out through the open windows. This was what they had built. Not just a successful ranch or a prosperous business, but a family rooted in love and respect, and the kind of deep happiness that came from facing life's challenges together. "I love you," Delilah said, the words as true now as they had been 35 years ago when she had first spoken them. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Gabriel replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "Today, tomorrow, and forever. You are my heart, Delilah. You always have been." As the evening deepened into night and the family continued their celebration inside, Gabriel and Delilah remained on the porch, content to simply be together. They had weathered literal and metaphorical storms, had built a life of substance and meaning, had loved deeply and completely. And if anyone had asked them for the secret to their happiness, they would have said it was simple. It was about being found when you were lost, about opening your door to a stranger in need, about choosing each other every single day in good times and bad, about building something together that was stronger and more beautiful than anything you could create alone. It was about a winter storm that had trapped them in a cabin, and a cowboy who had promised that she was safe with him until spring came. Spring had come and gone 1,000 times since then, but the safety remained, the love remained, and that, they both knew, was the greatest gift of all. When Gabriel passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, surrounded by his family, Delilah held his hand and whispered all the things she had told him 1,000 times before. That she loved him, that he had made her life complete, that she would carry him in her heart until they met again. She lived another 5 years, watching her grandchildren grow and have children of their own, passing down the stories of how their grandfather had saved their grandmother in a blizzard, and how love had bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. She told them about the cabin and the storm, and the moment she knew that Gabriel was the man she would spend her life with. When it was her time, she went peacefully, lying in the bed she had shared with Gabriel for over 50 years. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her, and in her final moments, she swore she could feel Gabriel's hand in hers again, could hear his voice telling her that she was safe with him. They buried her next to Gabriel on a hillside overlooking the ranch, beneath a sky as blue as the one that had emerged after that long-ago storm. The whole family gathered to say goodbye, 4 generations of Reeves who existed because a blizzard had brought 2 people together against all odds. And if on winter nights when storms blew down from the north, people claimed they could see 2 figures standing on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and watching the snow fall, well, no one was particularly surprised. Some love stories, after all, were too powerful to be contained by something as simple as death. The cabin still stood in the high country, maintained by the family as a memorial and a retreat. Jacob's youngest son eventually took it over, bringing his own wife there during a summer storm. And as they waited out the weather, warm and safe inside those sturdy walls, he told her the story of his great-grandparents, of how this cabin had witnessed the beginning of one of the greatest love stories he had ever known. The woman listened with tears in her eyes, understanding that she was part of this legacy now, part of a family built on the foundation of love and sacrifice, and the courage to open your heart even when you thought it was too broken to love again. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, there was warmth and safety and the promise of tomorrow, just as there always had been, just as there always would be, as long as the story was remembered and passed down through the generations, because some stories are too important to forget, some loves too powerful to fade. And the tale of the winter storm that trapped a shopkeeper's daughter and a cowboy in a cabin, leading to a lifetime of happiness and a family tree that would stretch into the future, was exactly that kind of story. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. It was a story of survival and second chances, of finding love when you least expected it, of building a life with someone who saw you for who you truly were and loved you all the more for it. It was, simply put, A story of two people who found each other in a storm and chose to weather every storm that followed together, hand in hand, heart to heart, until the very end. And that is the greatest love story of all.